it's really a hands-on, another pop-up just came on. It's really a hands-on treatment and requires time. And I think that's part of it. God wants us to establish relationships. So these treatments take one-on-one personal interaction, personal touch. I think that's a very important part of them, and they take time. So if we go on here, one of the big things that we think of with hydrotherapy is the effect on the vasculature. I'm just going to lay down some, many of you probably know some of this and maybe some don't. So I'm going to lay down the ground, some of the ground physiology, and then we might take it a little deeper. We definitely will if we have time. So hot water affects our vasculature. That's one of the main things. And so the intrinsic effect of hot actually on our body is to increase metabolism. We see that with water. When we put water on top of heat, on the stove, the molecules start to move faster and faster until it comes to a boil. Or your body starts to heat up, whether from external, the sun, or you're just exercising. Well, that's because your metabolism is generating heat, or the sun outside is increasing your metabolism, and so you're sweating, and that sweat is to dissipate that heat. We're going to talk more about that thermoregulatory effect. But the intrinsic effect of heat is to increase metabolism. We see that if you warm up the tissues in your body, whatever the function that they are designed to have, programmed to have, that they're going to carry out those functions even more. But the only clause to that is your muscles, actually. So as you heat up muscle, it actually is the exception. It doesn't increase its metabolism, kind of. Reflexively, it actually doesn't function, because if you're hot and you're in a hot environment, let's say it's a hot summer day, 100, well, really here it's only like 92 is like the hottest we'll get in Maine, but it's a hot day, your muscle doesn't want to contract. You don't want to add any kind of metabolism that's going to increase your heat, so you just don't feel like doing anything. You don't want to increase your internal temperature at all, so you just relax. So that's what happens to your vasculature. Just as your skeletal muscle doesn't want to generate any more heat, well, your smooth muscle, skeletal muscle is the muscle that's attached to your bones and such. Well, your smooth muscles, those visceral organs and the muscles that surround your blood vessels and your stomach and pancreas, all those muscles. But what happens when you expose heat to the body, it relaxes those muscles, causes them to dilate. That's why we call, blood vessel dilation, and then we have vasoconstriction. So you can imagine, if the hot dilates and relaxes muscle, well, then the cold constricts. And we've all experienced this by washing the dishes, and you put your hands in the hot water and they start to turn a little red, or depending on complexion and stuff, but you can see a visible change. And then when you put your hands in cold, they become a little bit more pale. And that's just because you're increasing hyperemia, increasing the amount of blood volume to that area. Well, actually, you can actually, I'll say this a little later, but the capillaries in your body, where actually oxygen and CO2 and other nutritional exchange takes place in your capillaries. If you look in this little diagram here, that's a capillary bed where actually oxygen and nutrients get exchanged. Okay, but all these capillaries in your body can hold up to about 30% of your total blood volume. So you can imagine, if you're in a hot tub of water, a bathtub of water, or a cold tub of water, you're affecting 30% of your total circulation. Because if all those little capillaries dilate, you're holding 30%, actually might even be a little bit more, but 30% of your blood volume. So if you go in a warm tub of water, you're dilating all those, and then you go in a cold tub of water, you're constricting those, you're actually augmenting almost 1/3 of your blood volume, which is pretty significant. And we're going to learn more about, the importance of the blood. But here's another aspect of it. This bar, I'm going to put it at the bottom because it's getting in my way.
So we are not seeing your slides.
You're not?
No, we're just still on the first one, the hydrotherapy.
Okay, well, that's so I'm switching through them. Can you see them now?
No, you probably just have to stop it and press share again. It usually freezes.
I'll do that. feel like we should like start over almost. And
Yes, so sorry.
no, that's fine. If any point there's any kind of technical difficulties, um, we can, somebody don't hesitate to say, can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can. We can.
Okay. And you can see like all my slides over here and such. I'm moving up and
Yes.
down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, when I go to presenter view, you see this one, of course.
Yes.
Do you see this one?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Should I start over for recording sense or should I just keep going? What, I'm open
Yeah,
to whatever.
you can go start right over again. Just as quick as possible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. So
Yep.
hydrotherapy. Let's go for it. Are you ready?
We're ready. Go ahead.
Awesome. Hydrotherapy is basically we're starting over again, but that's all right. Hydrotherapy is the use of water to for a therapeutic means. You know, there's lots of applications of water. It can be external or internal. In this presentation, we're going to talk mainly about the external application of water as it relates to augmenting our temperature, thermal regulating and such. But there's lots of uses of water. You know, water is important for decreasing the viscosity of our blood. It actually, you know, dilutes in a sense our blood and it makes it easier for the heart to be able to pump that blood throughout the vasculature. So it's the best thing you can do for high blood pressure or to increase circulation. And really, drinking water is probably one of the single best things you can do for your health, period. But we're going to talk about mainly the external aspects of water and not so much necessarily of cleaning the hands or washing metabolic debris off the hands or your body, the sweat, of augmenting temperature. So there's a lot to hydrotherapy and it's a real underutilized therapy. It's utilized a lot more in the past, but due to insurance and you know, having patient quantity, patient load, having to see more patients, because this is a very time consuming therapy. And I think that's with intention, because, you know, God, that's why he thinks so highly of it and wants us to use it, because it takes one-on-one interaction. It takes time to be able to build relationship, gives you opportunity to establish confidence and to really lead that individual to Christ or strengthen their relationship with Christ. So, and also one thing I really appreciate about water is that it's universal to an extent. You know, it's a universal solvent. It's everybody needs access to water. You know, it's available to the rich, the poor, the privileged, the you don't need to be in one portion of the world where you have this certain kind of you know, nutrient or something. No, it's available to everybody. And so that's why I think God, you know, Spirit of Prophecy and God really wants us to use it, because it's available. And actually no single, and you're going to learn this today, there is no single therapy that augments more physiologic mechanisms than hydrotherapy. So we're gonna learn more about that. But looking right here, we spoke briefly about the effects of, you know, this is where most people understand hydrotherapy, the effects on the vasculature, right? Hot increases, the intrinsic effect of hot is to increase metabolism, and the intrinsic effect of cold is to decrease metabolism. We're going to talk more on that. But the exception to that rule is muscle, both skeletal and smooth muscle, and actually cardiac muscle, okay? Skeletal muscle being the muscle that attaches bone to bone and enables you to move. Smooth muscle meaning the muscle that's in your visceral organs around your small and large intestine and your blood vessels. So when your vasculature gets warm, the smooth muscles do what? Relax, just like your muscles do, your skeletal muscles do on a hot summer day. You don't want to add to that heat that is already there. You're already hot, so you don't want to add any more metabolism, any more energy, produce any more heat on that hot day. So you just feel like laying low and not working in the heat of the day, maybe, right? Well, your vasculature does a similar thing. And so you've probably noticed this when you wash your hands in hot water, and your hands will become a little more red or change in complexion a little bit. And that's due to hyperemia, increasing the blood volume in that local environment. Conversely, if you put your hands in cold, they become a little bit more pale. And we spoke of earlier that the capillary beds, you know, that's actually where nutrient transfer of nutrients takes place, the exchange of oxygen and CO2 and other nutrients. Well, if all of your capillaries are dilated, they can hold about 30% of your total blood volume. So that's pretty significant when we talk about the ability to circulate blood. And we're going to look at more why circulation is important. But that's pretty significant. Your capillaries can hold like a third of your blood volume. So that's significant when it comes to circulating blood. Now, did we see this change? Do you guys see the next slide here? Do you guys see my next slide? There's a bucket of ice. Thumbs up, or anybody?
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
We see it.
so the effects of cold and hot on blood vessels, we kind of talked about that. But here's another neat aspect. There's a contralateral response also. What that means is if you put one hand in cold water, yes, the blood vessels are going to constrict in that hand. Or if you put that one hand in hot water, the blood vessels are going to dilate. Well, that also happens to a lesser extent in the other hand that is not in the water. Okay, so if you put this hand in hot water, this hand, the blood vessels will dilate, not to the same extent as this one that's actually submerged, but there is an effect. And you can, well, through different MRI tests and stuff and thermal imaging, they have noticed this also. But you can do contrast treatments in a hand that you might not want to have submersed in water or exposed directly to heat due to open wound or something of that nature, which we can get to. But that's a really neat concept to be aware of. So there's a response in the contralateral hand or foot. That happens in the extremities, not so much, in internal areas or closer to the core. So like if this chest is hot, it's not so much that this one gets hot. So it's mainly the extremities. Okay. But by appropriately using these two physiologic principles, it enables one to increase circulation systemically throughout the whole body or even locally, depending on where the hot and cold are actually being applied. That makes sense, right? But why would we want to increase circulation in the first place? Usually this is where I would ask for audience participation. What is carried in the blood? All sorts of things. Oxygen is carried in the blood, water, glucose, fatty acids, amino acids, cholesterol, electrolytes, white blood cells, proteins, platelets, hormones. Your blood is useful for temperature regulation, like elephants. That's why they have big ears, right? If they're really hot, they'll fan their ears and they'll increase blood flow to their ears. So they're taking the blood flow from their core, sending it to the ears, and that heat dissipates. That's why they're very thin. Well, we do that to an extent too when we're hot. Some people, their ears actually will get more red, and you'll divert blood from the core to your capillaries to try to dissipate that heat, and you lose a lot of heat due to evaporation. So we do the same thing. So the blood is actually crucial. If you take a tourniquet and put it around the arm or something, eventually what will happen to that arm? Well, it'll eventually not receive life, not receive new blood. The cells will begin to die, right? That's kind of what neuropathy is, the dying of the nerves due to a variety of factors, and then become necrotic, and then it'll eventually kind of fall off, or if it doesn't infect you. So blood is life. And we actually know that in Leviticus 17:11, it says the life is in the blood. We know that to be true in Leviticus 11. The life of the creature is in the blood. And it was a bigger sense, actually. It's how we receive eternal life, by believing in Jesus' blood, that his death on the cross makes atonement for our sins. That's a different topic, but even more valuable, but not what we're talking about right now. So what do these common conditions right here have in common? Heart disease, peripheral artery disease, atherosclerosis, arteriosclerosis, varicose vein, diabetes. What do they have? They're all affected or caused by poor circulation. They all affect circulation, or they're caused or brought on by circulation. For example, arthritis. I don't even have that one on here, do I? I don't even have that one on. Arthritis is, lack of blood flow going to the cartilage that is in your joints, in that, and where the synovial membrane, the synovial fluid, it's in between there, that cartilage. oftentimes lack of blood flow is not getting the nutrients that it needs. And actually, cartilage is a very interesting one because it doesn't actually have direct blood supply. It's avascular, meaning without blood supply. So it only gets its nutrients from perfusion, as the nutrients go from the capillary bed through the extracellular fluid, and then eventually those prostaglandins, which are necessary for that cartilage to be able to rebuild, eventually gets there. That's why a lot of these, sprains and strains and arthritis take so long to heal, because it doesn't have direct blood supply. But your muscles, they recover very quickly because they're very vascular. But varicose veins obviously affect circulation. Arterial sclerosis, the hardening of those blood vessels. Atherosclerosis, the hardening due to fat buildup of those blood vessels. So circulation plays a big role. So anything that we can do to increase circulation is going to increase health. And actually, we know that from not just logic, but from prophecy. In order to have good health, we must have good blood. For the blood is the current of life. It repairs waste and nourishes the body. When supplied with the proper food elements, and when cleansed and vitalized by contact with pure air, it carries life and vigor to every part of the system. The more perfect the circulation, the better will this work be accomplished. And then we all know this one: perfect health depends upon perfect circulation. So that just makes logical sense. If everything, the blood is the highway, the road network of our bodies. It's how everything is transferred. So it would be good that we'd pay attention to what is in the blood and how well it's circulating. Because it's not enough to just have good circulation. You actually have to have good blood. So how do we get good blood? Well, by feeding it with the right nutrients and giving wholesome things to it, that won't aid in glycation and make it more, increase the viscosity and such. Those are different. Well, glycation is just when the glucose is binding to the hemoglobin, and then that makes it stickier and it aggregates a lot more and leads to Rollet and other things. But so a hot compress to the low back. This is fascinating. Just applying a hot compress, like a fomentation, to the low back, increase circulation to the whole entire back by 156%. The entire back. Wow. So a warm bath here, 30-minute warm bath, improves blood fluidity by decreasing the viscosity of the blood. What's viscosity? That's how thick it is and how resistant it is to movement. You think of honey as very viscous, right? In the case of example, but water is not viscous. Doesn't have the tendency to stick together, cohesion, stuff like that. Although it does to an extent, but not as much as honey. And so if you can imagine, putting honey, trying to pump honey through a mud pump or some kind of pump, that would be a lot of work. That'd be very hard for the pump to do. But water, hey, that's not that bad. It's pretty easy to move water. It's very fluid. But yet our heart is a pump also. And if have the viscosity of honey or something near to it, that's going to wear out the heart prematurely. And also it's going to take more pressure to be able to do that, i.e., high blood pressure. So one of the best things we can do to help lower blood pressure is just drink more water, decrease that viscosity, and it's going to lessen the toll and on every single capillary in our body, on every single organ in our body. We'll touch a little bit more about that when we talk about the vascular compliance and such. But as we said earlier, the dermis can hold 25 to 30% of the total blood volume. And actually, I didn't write it on here, but there's a study that actually suggests that it's actually a little more than that, maybe 35%. But regardless, it's around a third of your total blood volume. But since we're having all of this effect on circulation and, increasing the dilating blood vessels, well, this affects the heart. So, is this safe for people with heart conditions? And I would also say, use wisdom, use tact, and understand your abilities and work within your scope of practice, of course. But so is this safe for people with heart conditions? Well, actually, studies suggest that it is. So 104-degree bath water immersion study was conducted on men with clinically stable coronary artery disease. And the study showed that sauna therapy with high humidity was safe for patients with stable heart conditions, such as hypertension, coronary heart disease, or stable controlled chronic heart failure. Another one, even a simple warm foot bath has been proven to improve coronary flow reserve with no adverse effects on patients with coronary artery disease. So we're going to look at some other cardiovascular studies, and that it is pretty safe, very safe for people with heart conditions. Now, I say that with caution. Like, doesn't mean that somebody has a heart condition, you go for it. No, you use counsel, and you got to be able to know signs and be aware of things. So right now, I'm just disseminating knowledge or information that is available to everyone in the literature. But we can answer questions after. So metabolism. Heat also increases metabolism, as we spoke of earlier. So, what is metabolism? We hear that's a buzzword, right? It means a lot of things to a lot of different people, but clinically, it actually means the chemical processes that occur within a living organism in order to maintain life or whatever the function of that cell is. So that's what it is. So when you increase the heat, you're increasing the cells, whatever it was supposed to do. You're increasing that. If it was to carry out this certain function, it does that even more. If it was a white blood cell, well, that white blood cell's purpose is to go out and find different antigens and things that aren't supposed to be there, or cells that aren't carrying out their proper function. So it does that more. And we're going to look at some different cells and analyze them. So heat increases function, increases the metabolism. And actually, a 1 degree Celsius rise in body temperature requires a 10 to 12.5% increase in metabolic rate. So that we can actually change our metabolism with heat, right? So if we were to just increase our temperature a few degrees, well, that's increasing metabolism by 12, 24, 36, 36 point, what is that? Yeah, like 35. Sorry, 36%. You're increasing it quite a bit. And so that has pretty good potential. And actually, I wouldn't advise this because there's better ways, unless something prohibits you, such as you're paralyzed. But bathing, hot baths have been utilized as a weight loss program. Now, I don't say that's the best way or anything. There's better ways to lose weight, but it has been used, and that demonstrates, proof of concept that it increases metabolism to an extent where you're increasing the amount of glucose, glycogen, fat being burned, being utilized in the mitochondria. So we talked about increased muscle. We talked about, heat increases metabolism systemically. That's the intrinsic effect of heat. But we spoke of how muscle is the exception to that rule. So hot actually decreases metabolism for both skeletal and smooth muscle, and cold increases metabolism, right? When you're cold, it's a cold day, what do your muscles do? Your body temperature is dropping a little bit, you start shivering, right? That's to increase your body temperature. But on a hot day, you don't really feel like doing anything, right? Because you don't want to add to the already hot environment that you're in. So that is, muscle is kind of the exception to that rule. And we can take advantage of this physiology and use it to our advantage, and we'll see how. Another effect that heat has on the body is it actually decreases the viscosity of the actual tissue. We talked about viscosity from a hemodynamic standpoint, from a blood standpoint, but it actually decreases viscosity of our actual connective tissue, our fascia. So muscle and fascia are thixotropic. This will be on the test. So thixotropic just means that when a substance is first moved, it resists movement, but after it has sustained energy placed on it, it then conforms or then becomes more elastic. Okay, does that make sense? So you think of the cornstarch experiment with water. When you punch it, it's hard, but then you just push down and your hand sinks into it. I don't know if anybody did that in school, or I was homeschooled, so did a lot of the practical little experiments. But anyway, that's what it is. So if you think about it, your muscles, when you're running, you're jumping off that Achilles tendon that resists that tension and enables you to kind of spring forward, right? But if you lay and you stretch out that Achilles tendon or that gastrocnemius muscle in your calf, it stretch, and then in time, it'll then begin to extend more. That's why we like to say, hold your stretches for 30 seconds or more so that you can get a good stretch. So that's what thixotropic means. But it's interesting that I think it's the next one right here. Oh, no, it's not. So it's interesting when we apply heat on the back. That's why, putting heat on your aching shoulders feels so good, because you're actually you're decreasing the viscosity. You're making it more elastic. That tension that's built up in your upper trapezius or your scalene muscles, or, those muscles very tight. Well, when you put heat there, you're relaxing them, and you're also relaxing the fascia there too. So the viscosity actually decreases by up to a factor of 10 after the initial energy is applied to it, and it increases collagen elasticity, so making it more elastic. That's why we want to heat up our muscles, warm up our muscles before we exercise, so that we don't sprain, tear, or strain any muscles or ligaments or tendons. So here we're just laying down groundwork physiology here. This is a more technical lecture, but we have spoken about maybe doing more practical in the future, but this is essential. So vascular compliance, that's really the ability of the smooth muscle around your blood vessels to be able to stretch, essentially, to be able to distend or expand due to the pressure that's placed on it. So I guess I could have just read my slide here, but blood pressure is one of the best predictors of future incidences of stroke, coronary heart disease, heart attack, heart failure, or actually it's a very good predictor of longevity in general. Why? Because, if you have increased blood pressure, it's placing additional toll, additional stress on every single organ in your body. Think of it, the tiny capillaries in your eyes, in your retina, right back there. If they have high blood pressure, well, those capillaries are only one endothelial cell thick, right? So any increase in pressure is going to be placing more, strain on those, the connecting capacities of those cells, and it can wear out. And actually, malignant hypertension, you can actually see bursting of those blood vessels. A good optometrist, if they look in your eyes, they can predict a lot of things, or they can see a lot of things, because they can see, oh wow, little tiny capillaries bursting. And people actually go blind from very high hypertension, malignant hypertension, because the tiny capillaries literally burst, and they're not surviving, they're not applying, they're not supplying new oxygen to the retina, to the eyes, and therefore you can't see. So life truly is in the blood. If we don't get blood to that area is going to die. So circulation is key. Actually, a while back, there was a study done by World Health Organization, WHO. Yep. Despite what you think about it, they did a study, and they actually said the leading cause of death around the world, I should say the leading actual cause of death around the world, because there's a difference, and it's not the point of this lecture, but I guess I have to explain it if I'm going to say this. So the actual leading cause of death around the world, what they said was actually not eating sufficient amount of fruit and eating too much sodium. Okay. Now, why they said that was because both of those nutrient effects on the blood pressure. So salt actually increases blood pressure due to the fact that it increases oxidation, and it suppresses an enzyme called superoxide dismutase, which is probably one of the most powerful enzymes that actually combat oxidation. It's it's an antioxidant, as we would say. No, it's not. It's an enzyme that helps to reduce oxidation. Okay, so when we consume a lot of salt, we actually inhibit that enzyme's ability to function. But conversely, in the study, they injected vitamin C, and they also looked at it from when they ate vitamin C, and it reversed it very immediately, because vitamin C actually increases that enzyme superoxide dismutase function to be able to reduce oxidation. That's a slightly different lecture, but so that's what they looked at. And so that just shows the significance of blood pressure. It's the leading cause of death around the world, hypertension. Sorry, the leading actual cause of death. Okay, what do I mean by that? So if you have lung cancer and you died of lung cancer and you smoked, the cause you died of cancer. Okay, lung cancer. That was what it would say on your death certificate. But the actual cause of your death, this is what actual cause means, is smoking. That's what it would be. So you died, the cause of your death was cancer, lung cancer, but the actual cause of your death is what caused it is smoking. So the leading actual cause of death around the world is blood pressure. Why? Well, blood pressure affects cardiovascular disease. So all your cardiovascular, stroke, coronary heart disease, heart attack, cardiovascular, all these different things. And not only that, but now you're talking kidney failure because you're increasing the stress that you're placing on your kidneys. Not only that, your liver. So if you have hypertension, you're putting more stress on every single organ in your body. So it's kind of a big deal. It's really important to have good blood pressure, and there's a lot of ways you can help it. Even treatment-resistant hypertension responds very well to hydrotherapy in its variety of forms, and we're going to look at that. But even just knowing some basic physiology, you can start to already put it together and realize, oh, how could I use that as a treatment? So this is why it's important to understand physiology, because then you can start applying concepts rather than doing this, then I do this step, and then I do this. No, you want to understand the concept, then you can apply that to whatever dysfunction you may be working with. So endothelium, what is that? The endothelial cells are the inside of your blood vessels. And anybody, you stop me at any point when when I should be done. Okay. So the endothelial cells are the cells that line your blood vessels, and it's really neat. They secrete a substance called nitric oxide synthase, to be more specific. And actually, endothelial dysfunction can be characterized as a decrease in secretion of this vasodilator, nitric oxide synthase. So, you've probably all heard of nitroglycerin, right? That nitroglycerin that, someone's having a heart attack, you give them some nitroglycerin, it dilates their blood vessels, very effective, very quickly. And we developed that. I had nothing to do with it, but they developed that, medication, life-saving medication for many, after realizing, oh, okay, what's this nitric oxide? Okay, wow, that dilates blood vessels. Well, can we make the synthetic form of that and save lives for people having a heart attack or something like that? But really, our bodies secrete that in a much more endogenous and better way. So why and how do they affect it? Well, actually, really any kind of manipulation of the blood vessels will secrete nitric oxide. So just by causing them to dilate, it causes them to secrete nitric oxide. Them being exposed to the sun, the ultraviolet rays, causes them to secrete nitric oxide. Massaging them, probably one of a good benefit of massage therapy, working that tissue, manipulating, that causes them to secrete nitric oxide synthase, this gas. And nitric oxide synthase is a huge field in and of itself, but there's a lot of other benefits that you can look into from nitric oxide. But the one we're looking at here is its vasodilatory capacity. It's the best vasodilator. And you know what? We secrete it whenever we're doing positive things, essentially. Whenever we're, you're going for a run or exercising, you're increasing, you're having to dilate blood vessels to those legs that are consuming, need more blood supply, need more oxygen. They're dilating, which causes them to secrete more nitric oxide. So all of these things, but especially when we're doing hot and cold, going back and forth. You're doing, I like to call it vascular gymnastics. You're really stretching those blood vessels. I've kind of coined that term, seeing if it catches on. But vascular gymnastics, stretching the blood vessels, anything that really moves them. So that's really cool, and that's actually, that concept is a good thing to know as far as treating hypertension. And this is just a tool in your tool belt. We've got hydrotherapy, water, we've got diet, we have mind-body connection, we have all sorts of things that we can, and as a whole, really help people. But this is one powerful tool that you would do well to increase your knowledge of. So end-stage heart failure. In this study, patients with cardiomyopathy with refractory chronic congestive heart failure who were awaiting heart transplantation were given a warm steam foot bath. The grade of mitral regurgitation tended to decrease, and endothelial function, those cells that line the blood vessels, actually increase significantly. Thus, the steam foot bath therapy is safe and beneficial for patients with end-stage, unstaged heart failure. And my bar is in the way, but I think it says awaiting transplantation, but I can't actually see it because my bar is right there. But yeah, end-stage heart failure. So, wow. Why do we use water? Why is water so effective at this? Well, water has a high specific heat capacity. What does that mean? It has a high ability to be able to I'll just read it. The amount of heat needed to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water by a substance by 1 degree Celsius. So that's what specific heat capacity. It actually takes a lot of energy to change its temperature, and it actually can hold that temperature for a substantial period of time. So, and then also it actually has a high ability to be able to conduct that thermal energy. So you touch, if you touch the rug and the rug is a norm. Oh, you've probably done this before. You're walking on the floor and it's a rug, and then you go over to a tile floor, and that tile is cold. You're barefoot, you walk on the rug, it doesn't feel cold. You walk on the tile, it's cold. It's actually the same temperature, given that it's the same floor and everything. It's the same temperature, but the conductivity of the rug, the fabric, is not very high, but the conduction of the tile is very high. So it's the same temperature. It's just not transmitting that energy very well. But water is very conductive. Like you can be in a hot sauna that is a dry sauna that is even 160 degrees, and you can do it pretty well. But you can't get in a tub of water that's 160 degrees. Lots of conduction taking place there. That's what we mean. So water has got this incredible capacity not only to retain temperature, but to conduct temperature. So why is this so cool? Well, if let me explain what heat shock proteins are, and then I'll convey this. So, what are heat shock proteins? Well, heat shock proteins are chaperone cells, and they do a lot of different things in the body. They're part of the innate immune system, and they actually function to maintain proteins. And so, for example, our proteins, for them to be able to function, they actually need to be in a three-dimensional shape, a structure. It's not just things in their right gene sequence, right? Adenine, guanine, or the different amino acids, right, in their sequence, and that makes up the what the protein does based on that sequence, and it's the written material to say what that protein does. Not only does it need to be in the right sequence, it needs to be in the right origami shape, so to speak. Okay, so if the sequence is wrong, you're going to have a misfunction of the gene, or it's not going to carry out perfectly what it was supposed to do. And that's kind of what cancer is. It's the sequence is off. And so what heat shock proteins will do is it'll go and say, hey, you're not actually expressing right, or your gene sequence isn't actually right. You're missing one, or it's in the wrong place. Let me go ahead and fix that. And in the heat shock proteins, we'll see that that's a problem and fix it. Or if the protein is not folded correctly, maybe there's a piece sticking out like this, the heat shock proteins will see, oh, that's not right. And they'll come over and put it back in place. And then now you've got your good functioning protein. But also the heat shock proteins will say, oh, that's too far gone. That one's totaled, as they'll say about a car. It'll cost more money to repair it than to just scrap it. So it actually will bind to that protein and signal for other white blood cells to come and phagocytize that protein, get rid of it, and then break it down to amino acid substrate, and then rebuild another protein. So heat shock proteins are really cool. As you can imagine, based on the name, heat shock proteins are stimulated or uptick or augmented with heat. Actually, any change in stress, not like mental stress, but physical stress. So actually, hot or cold, any of those extremes, because when we increase our temperature, proteins tend to, if it's really hot, like we're talking, 106 degrees for our brain cells, 107 for our neuronocytes. If those get to that temperature, they're a bit more sensitive. They'll actually start to degenerate and just like start unfolding, and break down. But heat shock proteins, God has given us a mechanism to be able even to resist that to an extent. But our cells and the rest of our body can withstand a higher temperature. But check this out. Well, this is neat too. So heat shock proteins are presented on tumor cells. So if you have a tumor, whether benign or cancerous, they'll actually say, hey, this is not supposed to be here, or this is not normal. Check it out. Oh yeah, it's not supposed to be there. And they'll bind to it, and then they signal for T cell lymphocytes to be cytotoxic to that tumor. So that's one of the really phenomenal things about hyperthermia baths. You're increasing the temperature. Not only are you increasing metabolism systemically, which means you're increasing metabolism of the white blood cells, the eosinophils, neutrophils, all of those things. You're increasing whatever they're designed to do, but you're also increasing heat shock proteins. I'll also say this. I have this in the part 2 of this lecture. Viruses and bacteria and unhealthy cells, meaning benign and cancerous cells, are weak thermally. So when you increase the temperature, the weakest die first. And our body, our healthy cells, can actually withstand higher temperatures. So just increasing the temperature when your body triggers a hyperthermic condition, because you do this in a fever, right? Your hypothalamus says, okay, resets the body temperature. We're going to pretend instead of it being, 37 degrees Celsius, we're going to pretend it's, it feels like 35. And so the body thinks you're really cold. So you shiver, you get these cold chills to generate heat. And that's how the body gets you to elevate the temperature. It does two things. It not only creates a thermal toxic environment for your body, for the unhealthy bacteria, virus, or cells, it also increases metabolism of the white blood cells and increases metabolism of the heat shock proteins. And as we'll find out next, FOXO3 proteins, which are similar to heat shock proteins. They still have a chaperone and regulatory effect on proteins. But so they do all sorts of things. But now the question is, how hot do I need to get the effects of heat shock proteins? Well, my bar is in the way here, so I can't read it explicitly, but what it says is just by raising your temperature a few degrees above normal temperature will increase the I'm going to move my bar so I can see this. Temperature of 37, for instance, 41 to 42 will actually increase the heat shock proteins. Okay. Actually, I'm going to try to change my slide. Did you guys see that change? I changed the slide. Did you see that?
Yes.
Okay, because I was thinking last time we had that issue. It says
heat shock protein.
Yep. Yes. Last time we had that issue, I thought it was when I clicked off of something. So I just wanted to make sure that we're still on the same page here. So heat shock proteins. So actually we can see to what extent. So after a healthy man and woman, this was a study done, sat in a heat stress chamber for 30 minutes at 163 degrees Fahrenheit. So this was a dry sauna. Their levels of heat shock protein, there's a huge family of heat shock proteins, but this particular one, heat shock protein 72, increased by 49%. Now, in this picture, it has a guy exercising in a heat chamber. In the study, they just had him sitting there. It's just the best picture I could find of a heat shock chamber. Of a heat chamber. So don't think that they were exercising. That would have stimulated a lot more heat shock protein for sure. But they were just sitting in there and it increased it by 50% nearly. And then in a different study in which healthy men and women were exposed to deep tissue heat therapy for 6 days, participants' levels of heat shock protein 70, a different one, and heat shock protein 90 increased 45% and 38% respectively. So 45 in the men, 38 in the females. So that's pretty significant. And actually, I have this in the next lecture, part 2, where they actually did studies where rats, they would unfortunately, or mice, unfortunately, they would cause muscular damage or damage to tendons, or and then they would apply heat, and it would increase the heat shock proteins, and they could see that, and it would their recovery time was so much more quicker, took place much shorter period of time. So that was just due to heat shock protein, probably a vascular response, new tissue, new blood to that area. We'll talk more about that potentially. Okay, so dysfunction and disordered proteins. Well, what are some common features? Well, dysfunctional and disordered proteins are common features in cardiovascular conditions. And these dysfunctional and disordered proteins aggregate and clump together. And that can lead to mutations and cancer. And then also proteins not carrying out its purpose. So, for example, aggregation and clumping together of proteins are strongly implicated in the pathogenesis, how that disease starts, in many neurodegenerative diseases, such as Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and Huntington's disease. For example, the proteins involved, or the beta amyloid plaques, right? In case of Alzheimer's, those form or in Parkinson's disease, the Lewy bodies become to form, or in Huntington's disease, the Huntington protein starts to get a little out of whack. So they start to become dysfunctional because of some mutation or dysfunction. Maybe the proteins are not in the right origami shape, or that three-dimensional shape. And so heat shock proteins go to help fix that. So actually, they even done studies, heat treatment with people with neurodegenerative diseases, and they found a positive effect towards that, a reversing effect. Now, prevention's always better than a cure. So have they totally reversed somebody's with enzyme Alzheimer's? No. They're in the beginning stages of the testing and of that kind of stuff. I'm happy to take more questions on that later if interested. But speaking of brain health, warm water immersion bath was beneficial in maintaining brain function and homeostasis by increasing the concentration of brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It's a neuron-inducing factor, and actually it aids in regenerating neurons in your brain. About 10, 15 years ago, they used to think that all the neurons that you have by 25, that's all you have for the rest of your life. But that's actually not the case. The brain is very plastic, meaning very able to adapt and for lack of a better word right now, renew itself, rebuild itself based on the term. So that's why it's very important to keep your brain stimulated. But also warm water helps that as well. A warm bath does. This is a neat one. Studies on hibernating animals demonstrate that an induction of cold shock proteins, right, just a difference in stress, particularly RBM3, what is it, butyrin, reactive butyrin molecule 3. I don't remember what that stands for, but RBM3 is important for synaptic regeneration for hibernating animals. So these animals that are hibernating, they're not doing anything for a while, several months, their metabolism is just slowed right down. But when they're slowed down, their temperature starts to go down. And what happens is this RBM3 actually increases due to the fact of the lower temperature in your body. There's a term for that. Your basal temperature dropping. And actually this RBM3 helps to increase synaptic regeneration. So while, you'd think, okay, their brain activity is going down, so when they wake up, they're not going to be as quick or as able to think or whatever they do, right? But this actually helps to maintain and sustain that. So they did that in animals that don't hibernate. They look at many animals that hibernate, and they all had this factor. Now they said, well, what happens if we cool down some mice? And so they did the same thing, and they looked for this particular molecule, and they saw RBM3 in animals' brains started to increase as they cooled the bodies down. So here's another aspect of, now they haven't done, I don't think they, as of yet that I know of, they haven't done this in humans. But I would imagine there's something very similar in humans, that as we're cooling down the basal temperature, that there's a factor that increases the brain's synaptic regeneration and helps to increase brain function, or at least sustain it. So there might be a beneficial effect on cooling down the body. These ice polar plunges. Actually, we do know that those are very good for brain health and for even these degenerative diseases, but this might be part of the explanation. But there's already a lot of benefits, just from circulation alone, and increasing metabolism. Sorry, I'm gonna exhibit or show you one of the best things you can do with water, one form of hydrotherapy. One way to know that you're getting enough water is that you're not thirsty, but also your urine is clear. And it'll be actually more white or just clear, unless you're taking some some B vitamins like riboflavin. That'll make it very yellow, but other than that, it should be clear. Or some medications will do that also. So you want your urine to be clear if you're not taking any medication that would conflict with that. That was a neat little tidbit that I saw about the RBM3. That was really neat. I think that has promise. It's a neat mechanism. But cold water application, that lends into that very well, lowering basal temperature. Well, significant increase of norepinephrine into the bloodstream, as well as in the locus coeruleus. And I don't think we have time to really go into the effects, why that's so important. But norepinephrine is a neurotransmitter involved in vigilance and focus and attention and mood. Generally, lower epinephrine activity is associated with inattention and decreased focus and cognitive ability, low energy, and poor mood. Is there another one? There is. My bar is in the way here. ADHD and depression are sometimes treated with I didn't look at it's NRIs. It's norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors. That's what that stands for. So ADHD, depression, what they're actually doing is they're saying, okay, don't take back the epinephrine yet, right? Because that's having a calming effect and helping the child or adult to be able to focus and stuff. So they're treated with a drug that'll make the uptake of that norepinephrine, that hormone, to not happen so quickly. Therefore, you have norepinephrine in the system a little longer, which aids in the focus and attention. But you know what? We can do hot and cold, or just cold plunge or cold shower, and that'll wake you up. I mean, you do that in the morning and you are focused. You get up, you're a little druggy, you're tired, kind of working yourself to the bathroom. You turn that cold water on, bam, you're awake. And that might be due to some other factors, but hey, no doubt it's decreasing the uptake of epinephrine and I guess norepinephrine, which is helping to as a neurotransmitter in your brain. So that's neat aspect. So cold water application and health. Cold is known to activate the sympathetic nervous system and increase the blood levels of beta endorphins, right? That happy hormone, and noradrenaline. So you're gonna feel better as well. Cold shower sends an overwhelming amount of electrical impulses from the peripheral nerve endings to the brain or the brain stem, which results in an antidepressive effect. We could go over the gate control theory. But I'll say this, in Weimar, some people may be aware of this. Weimar is a lifestyle center and a college in California. I was actually asked to teach there, but anyway, and they do, Neil Nedley has a renowned depression recovery program. And they actually do a lot with hydrotherapy and cold exposure specifically because it has got such a prominent effect on mental health and brain health. So cold stress induces analgesia, might be mediated by increased production of opioid peptide beta endorphins. So, we can, and even what's our famous doctor historically who kind of went off the deep end? Kellogg used ice a lot, even in surgeries. He used ice massage to numb an area to be able to even do some sutures or even do more invasive things. And actually, it's interesting. This is a freebie here. I know. So cold temperatures help to decrease, that analgesic effect, because it reduces the neuronal synaptic time. There's a name for that, but I'm forgetting it. But also even high temperatures of like 120, 130 degrees, he would actually spray that while he was doing some more invasive surgeries. And at those high temperatures actually will constrict blood vessels. And so, because other methods came along, I don't think we really explored this, but I'm just saying this for your information. What he would actually do, he's reported, I've got a book by him, is during a surgery, he would spray the hot water, the blood vessels would constrict significantly, and so that you're not bleeding out as he's doing that surgery. And then they would start to open a little bit, and he would spray a little bit more hot water, they would constrict, and then they would just constrict. I don't really know how long, but he did do some more invasive stuff, which is fascinating. So actually hot water has a vasoconstrictive effect also, but it's got to be very hot, and you would never want to apply something like that externally, and I wouldn't even do it, period, because we have ways to do that. But I think it's fascinating. Cold water application and health. Daily brief cold stress can increase both number and activity of peripheral cytotoxic T lymphocytes and natural killer cells. These are the major effectors of adaptive and innate tumor immunity and the immune system. So we have the innate immune system, the first responders, and then the adaptive responders, where the adaptive immune system, where we're figuring out that specific antigen, and then getting specific antibodies for that antigen. And that's where that takes about a week or so. We're getting a little bit more deeper in physiology here. That's fine. Cold water exposure. After subsequent cold exposure, there's an increase in immune system function, specifically leukocytes, granulocytes, circulating levels of interleukin-6 and natural killer cells, and other activities. And leukocytes, granulocytes, and monocyte response were also upticked or augmented and increased by pre-treatment with exercise and cold exposure. Actually, even more so, well, it even says it right here. When the cold and the exercise, when you were exercising in a cold pool, it actually increased white blood cell function even more. Cold water immersion reduced the nerve conductive velocity. That was the term I was trying to think of earlier. Nerve conductive velocity, which raised the pain threshold and promoted pain control. So when you're doing an ice massage, you're actually reducing the signal, like the signal of pain, to be able to get from here to your brain. The nerve conductive velocity, the actual time it takes to get that signal to your brain. So that's one of the ways that it helps to deal with pain. I could talk more about ice massage. It's neat. I've got some good testimonies from that. Mitochondrial biogenesis. This is another aspect of cold therapy that is really neat. So mitochondrial biogenesis, well, just from the name, mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, right? That's where you take, fuel, glucose, even fat, or other, food, glycogen, and you turn that into adenosine triphosphate. And that is really the energy currency of the body, which enables it binds to, the muscle, or I guess more specifically the troponin, and moves it so the myosin heads can crawl up the actin filaments, and you get contraction, right? That's what makes everything move as far as muscular. That's really important. So if you can increase your mitochondrial density, you can increase your ability to be able to produce ATP, which means you're also consuming more fuel. So this is more of an exercise concept, but one way that you can increase mitochondrial density, we'll get to the cold exposure, but one way is by pushing yourself. So when you're elevating your heart rate and you're getting tired physically, your body's saying, and you do that routinely, your body's saying, man, if this guy keeps this up, I'm going to have to be able to supply more energy, because he's calling for more than I can produce. And so the body says, okay, well, I see what he's doing here. I'm going to need to make more mitochondria so that I can supply him more ATP to be able to sustain that. And so therefore you get more mitochondria and you have more energy. And you actually this is why exercise helps you to have more energy throughout your day. It sounds counterintuitive, but you have more energy the whole day and through other things, and you're actually burning more fat. So this is why, exercise, I mean, obviously it's good for weight loss, but also even when you're not exercising, you're burning more fat. But is there a way that we can actually increase mitochondrial biogenesis or mitochondrial density? Well, yeah, just going into cold water, because now you're lowering your basal temperature or you're putting more stress on it. So your body has to generate more heat. So the metabolism has to increase and your muscles are contracting more. And so frequent cold exposure, cold immersion, plunge, whatever, actually increases mitochondrial density. So that's a neat thing, which has a lot of effects. I wonder, do I talk about brown fat? Let me just talk about it right here. Those who live in colder climates have more brown fat. Okay. You've heard of white fat, yellow fat, brown fat. Yellow fat has a lot of fat in it. It's just fat. But brown fat has high amounts of mitochondria in it. And mitochondria have a lot of iron in them. And that's why it kind of looks reddish or brown under a microscope. So that's why they call it brown fat. So yellow fat doesn't do anything for you, but brown fat does. Brown fat actually takes some of that fat because there's mitochondria in it and starts to produce ATP with it. Therefore, you're burning more fat. And so why do people in colder climates have this? Well, we got to burn more energy to survive. We have to, since it's cold outside, well, we need to sustain a 37-degree body temperature. So we have to burn more calories. And so those, Eskimos or people who exercise in cold temperatures or who are outside or people that have to work outside have more brown fat. And so cold exposure can do that, and just your external environment can do that too. FOXO3 proteins, they're similar in some ways to heat shock proteins. They play important roles in human lifespan and healthy aging. They regulate a vast number of genes that combat elements of cellular aging, such as damage to the DNA, proteins, and lipids, and loss of stem cell function. They increase the production of genes that regulate DNA. They regulate DNA repair, tumor suppression, stem cell function, immune function, and protein aggregation to further mediate the deleterious effects of aging. So they really do a lot with aging and oxidation and just making sure, similarly to how heat shock proteins work, but function a little bit differently. This coil swiggly thing right here, the green, the yellow, those are all proteins. That's the three-dimensional shape that a protein has to be in. And so it not only has to be in the right gene sequence or the amino acid sequence, it needs to be in the right shape. So FOXO3 proteins and heat shock proteins go to regulate that. FOXO3 teams following FOXO3, yeah, that's fine. I can send the PowerPoint to anybody who wants, but it's just more goodness is what it is, more good stuff. Warm water bath for type 2 diabetics. I'll end right on here on this study. So it's really neat. They did a study. I forgot to look at it before I presented this, but it was a 3-week study, and they had and all biomarkers that were measured improved. Okay, what did they do in the study? The only thing that they did is they had the individuals do a warm bath 3 times per week. And that warm bath was about 30 minutes to 45 minutes long, or 30 to an hour. And so they did that warm bath, and the temperature, does it say what the temperature got up to? No, it's just it does in the study, but warm bath. And they did that 3 times a week and 30 minutes to an hour long. And all biomarkers were improved in their diabetes. Diet was not changed. No other lifestyle factor was changed. Just in doing a bath 3 times a week, and it lowered insulin on average by 18% to one patient had to lower his insulin by 18% to prevent hypoglycemia, and the average weight loss was 2 pounds. Remember, this was the only thing that changed, just this bath. And the average fasting blood glucose level dropped 23 points, which is significant when you're not doing anything. That's not like the primary treatment for diabetes. This is just and their glycosylated hemoglobin levels, hemoglobin A1C, right, decreased. Okay, that's pretty significant. not only that, with diabetes, you've got increased glycation. You're increasing the viscosity of the blood right there, making it thicker. But with that warm bath, you're decreasing that viscosity, making it easier for the heart. So one of the things with hydrotherapy is that all the benefits, most of the benefits of hydrotherapy are the same from a thermal standpoint, from an elevation of temperature standpoint, even from a contrast standpoint, are the same as exercise. So there is no better thing that one can do for their health than to move or exercise. Well, all the benefits of exercise are in hydrotherapy, with the exception of the actual stretching of skeletal muscle and the impaction or the compounding resistance on the muscles and maybe some others. But a lot of the physiologic benefits of exercise occur in hydrotherapy. That's why you get a lot of similar results. But a simple hot foot bath, actually, this is going into more practical. So with that, I have no idea what time it is. Now I do. Are there any questions or where what do we want to do from here? I'm going in. The next part is like the next part. I have another presentation. Well, I thank you for listening. Maybe I was just so clear and there are no questions. No, I don't think that's the case.
No, so they are asking for you to keep going, but I guess we would have to try and allow people to start asking you questions. Thank you so much. You gave us so much information, Brother Josiah. So clear, so clear. And so I don't think, you have anyone that's asking, oh, what does that mean? Great presentation on hydrotherapy. But we're going to go ahead and allow you guys to raise your hands for all the questions that you may have had with all the information that he shared. Anyone have questions? No one. So like Josiah, maybe that's what it is. They learned everything that they needed to know about hydrotherapy.
Well, I know how Zoom calls go, and I know how in-person presentations go, and it's not that there's no questions, it's just that's the nature of online classes. So I totally get that. But if you do receive any questions, I'm happy to answer them, or we can do it in another call potentially if that's something that everyone would be interested in, or even a fraction of the people.
Okay, so someone asked, when is part 2? When will it be done? So
I guess that's up to you.
Yes, but let's go with, someone is asking about the Fox 03.
FOX03 proteins, yes. Let me go back to that portion. FOX03 proteins, what about them is being asked? Okay. And I'm happy to share my...
So we have hands raised. Hold on one second. Let's go ahead, D. Go ahead and unmute.
Hi, thank you so much for the such an important presentation. I wanted to ask, if someone is immobile, well, they're not really walking and stuff like that, and they have inflammation, would the hot and cold therapy work to help build up white blood cells to possibly fight that inflammation?
So yeah, it's gonna instigate a lot of different mechanisms. The hot and cold isn't necessarily directly gonna fight the inflammation, so to speak. I mean, it's a loaded question, but my first question, if this is more of a case question, would be, why is the person immobile? Are there any contraindications that would say, okay, maybe I shouldn't do hydrotherapy in this individual? Because if they're immobile, well, that's they have some condition that is affecting them. So I guess if their physiology was completely normal and they were paralyzed, but all their physiology aside from their ability to move their legs and stuff, if that's healthy and no cardiovascular and no other conditions, then yeah, a bath is going to be very good for them, to help maintain their physiology. I don't know if there's a more specific question there, but any benefit of movement you would gain from the hydrotherapy, with the exception of the resistance and stuff. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Galaxy Z.
What a name.
Yes.
Hello. I think my question is very complex because I'm not even sure which one to ask. So it seems as if the hydrotherapy is good, and it can be, if it's too hot, it can be bad.
Mm-hmm.
And my thing is, where's the balance for like someone with high blood pressure? Like, is it bad eating ice? I mean, since
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think your dentist would say don't eat ice, and I would probably agree with them. Although I have at times, I enjoy a good crunch, but I think dentists frown upon eating ice for a variety of reasons that I'm not so knowledgeable on. Maybe just the just not good on the enamel. But as far as using temperature to help with high blood pressure, there's a variety of things to consider there. But yes, a nice neutral bath, and we can talk about temperature. Usually a neutral bath is considered like 104 degrees Fahrenheit, anywhere, that's the upper portion of a neutral bath. Well, no, that's a pretty hot neutral bath. Maybe like, 95 to 100, that would be a neutral bath. Okay. That would be a good vasodilation. That'd be good for lowering blood pressure and doing that vascular gymnastics, relaxing that smooth muscle. Now the only contraindication to that, it's not even an absolute contraindication. So somebody with hyperthyroid. So remember, you're increasing metabolism. So somebody with hyperthyroid, and I've witnessed this in a few cases, you're actually, when they're in the tub, like you're doing a hyperthermia bath, then they're in the tub, you're increasing the function of that thyroid. So you're increasing the production of the T3 and T4 that the thyroid produces. Therefore, you're actually increasing their blood pressure. So their blood pressure will actually stay elevated for a bit longer, because you're having it stimulates epinephrine to be elevated. So, but in other cases, yeah, that's a kind of a specific, but a nice neutral bath probably wouldn't have that effect. That was with a hyperthermia bath where we're trying to raise their oral temperature to about 102 or 104. And somebody can ask a question on that, and I can talk more about that as far as specifics. But a nice neutral bath, warm. Now, I have had a case where somebody, it was in a clinic, a health clinic, actually Uchee Pines, and their blood pressure, they were eating, and their blood pressure just dropped, and they just kind of fainted. They were in a chair, and it just dropped, and it actually kind of happened kind of slowly, and people that saw it before I did, it was going down, and he was getting more what's the word, just relaxed and just not with it, and his blood pressure really dropped, and it was going down to the point where his speech was slurred and his motor function was down. Okay, and when I got there, I was like, oh wow, okay, somebody go get some cold water. And somebody ran and got cold water. I checked his blood pressure and it was down, and once we put his feet in the cold water, all of those responses started to reverse, and his speech came back. He just came alive, and he came back to normal, and his blood pressure increased as we did that. So what were we doing? Put his feet in cold water. The blood vessels were super dilated. Well, we constricted the blood vessels, increased increased the blood pressure. Well, you're doing the exact opposite of that when you're trying to lower the blood pressure. I was just saying the magnitude of the effect that you can have by just sitting in a warm bath, or even putting the feet in a hot bath, a hot foot bath. That'll relax those blood vessels, therefore relieving the pressure within them.
Okay, so we hope that we answered her question.
If
We're
not,
gonna go
ask or
to
something.
okay. So we're gonna go to BC. Can you unmute for us?
Before Christ.
Thank you. Thank you, Josiah, for the message. Yes, just two questions. Because I just have a friend, I heard that she has very high blood pressure. And so I'm just wondering, how we can, at least how I can kind of disseminate this hydrotherapy treatment to help her. Because she's the only sole breadwinner and she has 2 children, and I really want to help her lower her blood pressure. The other question is, I know that we can use hydrotherapy perhaps, or maybe it's not. So how can we, yes, we can. How about using hydrotherapy to help someone with cough? I think they say hot fermentation, but I'm not very confident in doing that. So I was really hoping maybe you could teach us so that I can use that, on my family who's having a bad cough.
Absolutely. Great question. I'll address the first one first. The blood pressure. So hydrotherapy is a powerful tool that you have in your arsenal. I'm going to get this back so I can see you guys. There we go. A powerful tool that you have in your arsenal, and it's very powerful. Okay. But we want to use a holistic approach. So the first thing that I would want to do is actually look at her diet and her lifestyle. What from that perspective can we help to reverse or help with her blood pressure? So we want to, help to, reduce mental stress, right? You can't get rid of the stress, but we want to help to deal with that stress. That's a little different talk, but we want to reduce the oils. We want to reduce anything that's going to refined oils, anything that's going to, add to inflammation of the blood vessels. You get rid of refined sugars, refined carbohydrates. So that's a good point. And then you want to start increasing fruits and vegetables that have the vitamin C in them. We don't want to have packaged food because, the daily, what people normally eat for salt intake is around 3,500 milligrams of salt a day, when the recommendation is around 800. And even that is a high estimate influenced by the salt industries. But we don't need that much salt. So that actually increases oxidative stress, which increases inflammation to the arteries, which increases blood pressure. So we want to have more vitamin C, more antioxidants in our diet. So everything that's plant-based is going to be good. Just easy on the oils. And then from a hydrotherapy standpoint, from a blood, you want to start exercising, because what's that doing? All the things that we talked about, stretching the blood vessels, right? Vascular gymnastics. But then on top of that, you don't use hydrotherapy instead of exercise if you can exercise. But on top of that, you can start doing vascular gymnastics. So put your foot in a hot foot bath or hot shower. I like not necessarily a shower for hypertension, although you can, but I like the bath because you become more relaxed. Your mind it tends to be more relaxed. A variety of things, but your vasculature is going to relax. Like your blood pressure has to decrease when you're in a bath because you have a mechanical, you're mechanically like very much like dilating those blood vessels. So your blood pressure has to go down. So at least for that time. And then because of nitric oxide, because you're increasing the elasticity, you're going to have a latent response. It's going to be prolonged. So in time, the more you do it, the more flexible your blood vessels will become, the less inflammation that's going to be within them. Therefore, less hypertension. Actually, I'm working on conducting a study that's going to look at, it's going to measure to what extent and how long over 3 weeks, a hot bath, total submersion, how long that affects hypertension and what's the latent after each bath. Sorry, I shouldn't even have brought that up. But yeah, that's what I do. Yep.
All right. So over here in Singapore, we don't have, we most of us don't have like a bathtub. Yes.
Yep.
So can we do the hot foot bath? That means like,
yeah, absolutely.
The hot and cold.
Yep. Well, hot and cold. So I would actually, for this pathology, I would say just do the hot, relax those blood vessels. There is benefit to the cold too, but for this, lowering of the blood pressure will lower it, and we actually won't even end on cold. Just end on hot, and allow those blood vessels to stay relaxed. But
For
there
20
is,
minutes?
that hot and cold in the morning, that's cool too. You can do that for other things, but it'll help with that vascular gymnastics.
For 20 minutes, Josiah, or half an
Oh,
hour?
yeah, sure. Half hour. I mean, it's on a spectrum. The longer you do it, the better it's going to be, really. That's not infinite, of course, but 30-minute, that'd be nice. 30 minutes a day in the evening. I recommend people to do it in the evening before they go to bed, so they're even better ready for bed. Like their muscles are relaxed, their blood vessels are relaxed, and their mind is hopefully relaxed. Put on some nice music. Nice
Wonderful.
classical music. If you like rock and you like jazz and you like those things, studies have shown that classical, and not all classical music, but nice, steady classical music is better. Yeah. Hymns. Oh, and then the second question you had.
Thank you.
There was another question.
Cough.
What was it? Oh, for cough.
Coffee.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I think let's address that in another class potentially. And if we don't, I have a YouTube video. I have a YouTube channel that I have put out some videos a while back, and videos take a lot of time to produce. But I have a video on fomentations. And so you can maybe look up my name, Josiah Wannemacher, hydrotherapy, fomentations, put in those keywords and it'll come up. The channel is Healing Lifestyle, is the name of our business in the past. I mean, it still is, but yeah, I do a lot of different things. Yeah, Healing Lifestyles, the YouTube channel, or Josiah Wannemacher Hydrotherapy. Look up fomentations, and there's some other hydrotherapy videos there.
Okay. Thank you, BC. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
you'll
Yeah.
keep in touch with us to know when he will come back on. Zoom user, go ahead and unmute.
Oh, hello. I was actually typing my response, but I was wondering about simultaneously using a cold compress and the foot bath simultaneously to help lower that blood pressure, to help decrease the flow of blood, especially most patients have a headache. So by causing that vasoconstriction, you're shunting the blood flow toward the lower extremities. Then you have that foot bath in place to help lower that blood pressure. And then I was typing in the chat, but what about increasing potassium in our diet from the coconut water or foods to help shunt that sodium back in the cell? I mean, you're just going to take everything to help get that blood pressure down. And it's not a one-time fix. It's going to be a maintenance program to help keep that blood pressure low because it is a silent killer.
It's the leading cause of death around the world. You brought up a number of good things. So you mentioned headaches. A lot of people have headaches. There's a couple different causes to headaches. They can be, the most common. Well, I don't even know if it's the most common, but it can be a tension headache, which is your muscles, the scalene muscles, your upper trapezius muscles, everything's getting tight. And then you have something called the aponeurosis, which is a fascia connective tissue that goes over your skull. And then you have the frontalis muscle. So just imagine all the muscles being tight, just compressing, just tightening around your head, right? That can be painful. That's called a tension headache. So, reasoning from cause to effect, if the cause is increased tension in the muscles, well, stretching the trapezius muscle, different stretches you can do for that, but also putting a hot fomentation on your back is also going to relieve the tension there also. So that's the case. That'll work if it's a tension headache. Now, a hot foot bath will help if it's a pressure headache. Pressure headache is increased blood volume in the brain, and it's just feel like you feel the pulse in your brain, right? Pound, pound. Well, there's a lot of pressure there due to the blood volume. And so what you can actually do is what my sister was saying, put your feet in hot water. You have a fixed amount of blood in your body. So if you can dilate the blood vessels there, you're relieving the pressure in your skull. You don't really have to worry at all about taking all the blood from your brain. You won't do that. So don't be concerned about that. But You just put your feet in hot, that dilates, lowers the pressure. You can also put some cold on your head a little bit, and make sure there's a barrier. But we can talk more about that in the practical, maybe, if we manage that, if we do that.
Okay.
Oh, and I liked what she said about the nutrient standpoint, potassium. Yeah, muscles need potassium to relax. Without that, you won't get that relaxation. So, but you'll get all the potassium you need from a plant-based diet. So that's where I would start first, plant-based and exercising. And then these can be done first. So when I say first, I really mean not to the exclusion of diet and exercise. It can happen simultaneously. You can start doing all those things, but don't exclude diet and exercise.
Okay. So we have an unusual sequence right now. We have Diane and Diane, but before they go, there is someone on YouTube that is asking a question, and they would like to know about, please describe some hydrotherapy for diabetes, please.
Yeah. So for hydrotherapy, one of the contraindications for hydrotherapy is neuropathy, and neuropathy is nerve death, essentially, where you have decreased ability to sense the temperature and stuff. And so if you have decreased ability to sense temperature, you put your hand in hot water, you've got the Superman problem. You can't even feel the hot water and you're burning your tissue. Okay. So if you can't sense that it's hot, you don't know if you're burning that individual. So that's like, it's not an absolute contraindication, but it's something to be aware of. And so you just do a milder approach. So oftentimes with someone who's diabetic, they have neuropathy. Why? Because elevated levels of glucose and insulin both cause inflammation to the arteries. And with that inflammation comes poor circulation. And with that poor circulation, well, also comes glycation and also poor circulation. And therefore you have less, especially on the peripheral arteries, like your feet and stuff. And so, and therefore the nerves start to die and suffer. Now there's two things. So now you have a decreased ability to sense the temperature due to the nerves, but also you have a decreased ability to thermoregulate. So if our hand is in hot water and it needs to cool down, what we'll do, or if a body part is too hot, what it'll do is it'll send that blood away, take blood from a different area and bring it and circulate the blood a little bit more to cool that body part down. So that's how we thermoregulate. But if your vasculature is not able to do that, you can't actually thermoregulate as well. So the idea is if that hand is getting very warm or foot very cold, the body can't actually circulate and bring cooler blood to that area to help keep the temperature down. So you can actually kill cells. So that's part of the reason. So you want to be careful with people with vascular disease and a neuropathy, because they can't thermoregulate as well and they can't adjust to the temperature. So that being said, the last thing that we touched on for diabetes was that treatment, was the bath, and that had favorable effects, but it wasn't ridiculously amazing as far as the total effect on diabetes. So I would approach diabetes from more of a dietary and lifestyle approach, although the hydrotherapy is going to help with all the other symptoms. It's going to help regain that circulation. It's going to help dilate the blood vessels and increase that elasticity and all from that standpoint. But to address the root cause, we want to increase that insulin receptivity and increase the fiber content, decrease the fat, which is really inhibiting the insulin from binding to the insulin receptor. But that's a different talk, and we can do a diabetes talk maybe sometime.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead with Diane, the first Diane. Are you able to unmute?
Yes. Good evening. Thank you, Brother Josiah, for the presentation. It was very good. I just have a question in regards to, I know you're saying the hydrotherapy, getting the blood to the certain area to heal. So if you have a meniscus tear and there's inflammation from that tear, And doctors saying the tear can heal on its own. Would hydrotherapy help speed up the process? Would you say that's something I should be doing more of, or for a meniscus tear?
Yeah, 100%. And meniscus is avascular, like the anterior and posterior cruciate ligaments and stuff. All of those are avascular. So they actually, when they do get damaged, they take longer to repair. Your tendons, your ligaments, even they come across, like when we look at actually I might even have something right here. When we look at the pictures right here, I just happen to have one of these in my bag. When you look at the muscles here, you see the muscles are red, and then the ligaments and the tendons are white. Well, they're white because they don't have blood supply. So when you tear them, they take a long time to heal, because they don't have that direct access to new nutrients, to new life, right? And so anything that we can do to increase circulation will increase the ability to bring prostaglandins and other proteins that are essential to rebuild that broken tissue. So again, it only gets its nutrients through perfusion, it going through the extracellular fluid and eventually getting to where it needs to be. That's putting it rather crudely, but that's essentially it. So if somebody has arthritis or a meniscus tear, or they sprain their ankle, or in sports medicine, hydrotherapy is practiced more than anywhere else. Sports medicine and physical therapy, it still is, because it works. And when you're the owner of the Patriots, you don't really care about getting endorsements from different pharmaceutical companies. You just want to get your athlete back on the field, because every time, the longer that injury takes. So what I'm saying is, they just care about recovery for healing time. So sports medicine, they just want to get their athlete recovered back as quickly as possible and back on the field or court or whatever it is. And they use a lot of hot and cold. So that's what I would say to that: hot and cold, just to bring new blood to that area and new circulation. So yeah, that's the treatment for those kind of things.
Yeah, but one quick thing, I know with the physical therapist, they just put the heating pad and then the ice pack. Is that just as good, or you just have the water? Because they put the heat on there and then you get some ice. Yeah,
I can go to the history a little bit of physical therapy, but I won't. It's mainly I guess I'll touch on it a little bit. In the past, they were doing more hot and cold and more fomentations, but you know what? If you have to see 5 different people at the same time, if you got a fomentation on somebody, you're not checking up with them if you're in the other room. And so people were getting burned more because you're not with them. You're not, how's the temperature? How's it going? So, and then you get burned, you get a blister. Hey, that's not supposed to happen. That's malpractice. I'm going to sue you. All right. I don't need to deal with that suing. I'm going to stop doing that aspect of hydrotherapy. So that's why oftentimes we don't see a lot of hydrotherapy practiced as much on a day in, day out basis, because it increases potential for being sued. Not because it's ineffective, but if you've got to see 5 people in an hour, all right, that's it's effective, but can't take the risk. So as far as just hot and cold, one of the effects, we want moist heat. Why? Because water conducts heat well and it retains heat well. So there's no better conduction to have that ligament or that body part immersed in the water, because you're going to get the most conduction in that. So if you can put your ankle in a hot bath of water and a cold bath of water back and forth, that's great. But some body parts, on your back or something, is not as easy to do that contrast. So what we'll do, or on your chest, hot fomentation, moist fomentation on the chest, and then take it off, take a wet cloth dipped in ice water, wring it out a bit, and do a cold mitten friction, as we call it, on the chest. And that's the best you can do in those cases. So we'll use fomentation, but the principle is all the same. Moist heat, better conduction, higher specific heat capacity. So same concept, same principle, but having immersed is far better because you're conducting more thermal energy.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you, Diane. All right, we're going to go to iPhone, Diane. Are you able to unmute?
I am trying right now. Yes, I
You're
should
the
be unmuted. Okay, thank you. I woke up this morning. Thank you for your presentation. I woke up this morning with my left hand swollen. Not sure what's going on. I haven't done anything to it, to help it today. Wasn't quite sure what I needed to do. So I don't know if I need to do hot and cold. I'm just wondering if something is deficient in my body that made it happen, because I went to bed last night fine and I woke up like this. So I'm just not sure.
Yeah, I'll just say a question like that is rather personal, and I would
Oh,
want
is
to
it?
ask.
Okay.
No, and I don't mind it at all. But it would take more. I can answer it broadly, but to answer your specific case, it would take more of a history to
Okay.
ascertain what are the causes, because that's what we want to do. We want to reason from cause to effect.
Okay.
And what is causing that retention of fluid or the swelling? Is it more of a retention of fluid, or is it more of a inflammatory response, meaning a histamine response? Or
Okay.
what is setting off that?
Okay.
So without knowing those specifics, and we won't do that right now. We're not going to do it like a clinical thing, but I'll say something. So like edema, for example, edema has a couple different causes. But one mechanical cause is you have increased blood pressure that weakens over time the valves in your veins, the one-way valves. As the blood, goes up through them, it doesn't come back, like lobster traps or just one-way valves. It goes through and then it closes. But what happens is the valves get a little weak and blood actually drips back, pools back. And that increased pooling of the blood vessels, it's actually associated with varicose veins too. But that pooling, well, the blood, the fluid will actually start to leak out into the extracellular fluid, meaning you have increased fluid in your tissue, that's edema. Right? And so what we want to do to help that edema is try to decrease the blood pressure or make that normal, but the injury might already be there. Even though there's no hypertensive situation, you might have already damaged the blood vessels. But we want to help circulation. So some things that you can do: elevate your feet, of course, but even some hot and cold, gentle hot and cold will help to reawaken that those muscles within the smooth muscle within the veins and such. So even a gentle hot and cold can be beneficial from that standpoint. But I would want to more ascertain, is it an inflammatory response that there's swelling? Is it a nutrient imbalance like potassium, sodium? Are those kind of off? Those are some things that I would want to look into, because nothing happens without a cause. There's always a cause, whether it's you or whether it's a previous generation. There's always a cause.
Okay. Thank you.
So I actually we were just doing a Bible study. I had a Bible study just before this, and I had to leave that a little early. Upstairs, we're at a friend's house where the Bible study is taking place, and I actually hear my kids getting ready to go. So I think maybe I can take one more question, or I actually hear them in the next room. Yeah, preparing.
No. So we want to say thank you so much. Thank you. We do want to have you live, right? Somehow doing trainings in the later part of the fall, if that's possible. And
potentially, let's plan it out. Let's think about it.
Yeah, so we want to really work on people actually knowing how to facilitate what you have actually taught us. And so we want to increase knowledge by doing.
We may even be able to do a practical session through Zoom somehow too, but we can talk about those details.
Okay. All right. So
well, do you want to have a closing prayer?
We do.
Okay.
We would like for Dr. Randall was here and he left. He came to visit you, Josiah.
Praise the Lord.
Yeah, but if we can have a volunteer for closing prayer would be great. Anyone that would raise their hands. We also want to remember a friend of mine who has lost her son, her only son, in a tragic accident. So we want to remember her in prayer. All right. Well, Josiah, if you can just close
Sure,
us out.
absolutely.
That would be great.
Dear Heavenly Father, tonight, this afternoon, we have learned again that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. There's a lot of things that are taking place that you have designed and set up to help to restore and fix and maintain our bodies. And we just want to learn more of your creation so we can act more in harmony with how you've designed us to function. I pray that some of the information that was shared would be retained and that an interest was sparked to learn more of your natural world. Also, I pray that through this, we'll maintain the right focus and that this information is to be used to honor and glorify you and to bring others into a life-saving relationship with you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. And
All
they're
right.
saying thank you in the chat as well.
Blessings. Thank you so much. It was a privilege, a pleasure.
Alrighty. And we look forward to having you back with us soon.
Awesome.
All right. God bless you. Thank you, BC. She's gonna need it.